A nation buys a fighter jet. A headline number is enormous, tens of millions of dollars for a single aircraft, and that number is what makes the news. It is what the public argues about, what politicians defend or attack, what everyone imagines when they picture the cost of a modern weapon. Follow that dollar past the sale though, and something strange happens. For every dollar the nation spends buying the jet, it will spend several more. Over the decades, the aircraft flies, on the parts, the repairs, the upgrades, and the endless care that keeps it in the air. Nearly every one of those later dollars flows back to the same company that sold the jet in the first place, because that company is the only one able to supply them. And the sale was never where the money was. That money was in everything that came after, and in one quiet, powerful fact. Once a nation buys in, it cannot easily buy out. It is locked to the maker for the entire life of the machine. For parts and fixes and upgrades, it has no choice but to buy from the one company that can provide them. That lock is the real asset, not the jet. The decades of captive spending, the jet drags behind it. By the end of this video, you will understand why the purchase price of a weapon is often the smallest cost in its whole life, why the company that builds it can sometimes afford to sell it cheap, why the real fortune in the defense business is the aftermarket nobody sees, and why owning the right defense contract is closer to owning a toll booth the customer can never drive around than to selling a product once and walking away. Follow the first dollar, the sticker price. Start where everyone else starts and stops. Just the purchase. When a government commits to a major weapons program, the number attached to it is staggering. And it is the number that dominates every debate. Cost per jet, per tank, per ship. Journalists report it, committees fight over it, rivals point at it, and it is a real, enormous cost, no question. Buying the hardware of a modern military is one of the largest things a state ever spends money on. A single advanced program can cost more than a nation spends on entire departments of its government. So the scrutiny is understandable. When a number is that large, everyone looks at it. What almost no one does is keep looking after the purchase is made. But watch what that purchase actually is. In business terms, it is the moment a customer commits, not to a product, but to a relationship that will last 30, 40, sometimes 50 years. A jet that rolls off the line is not a finished sale the way a car is. It is the start of a dependency that lasts decades, and the price on the sticker is only the entrance fee to a building the customer will be paying to stay inside for the rest of that machine's life. So the first dollar, the famous one, the one on the news, is the one everybody watches. Keep following it, and you leave the crowd behind, because almost nobody follows the dollars that come next. And the dollars that come next are where this business actually lives. Follow the dollar past the sale, the tail. Here is where the money goes once the cameras leave. A modern weapon system is fantastically complex, and it does not run itself. Across its long service life, it needs a constant, enormous flow of support. Spare parts, thousands of them, wearing out and being replaced. Scheduled maintenance, deep overhauls, repairs. Software updates and hardware upgrades to keep it current as the decades pass. Training systems, simulators, technical manuals, the specialists who know how to keep it working. This whole ongoing river of activity has a name in the industry: sustainment. And sustainment is the real business. Look at the scale. For many major programs, the cost of operating and sustaining the fleet over its lifetime is not a fraction of the purchase price. It is a multiple of it. Take the F-35, the largest weapons program in history. Its total lifetime cost has been estimated at around $1.7 trillion, and the majority of that colossal figure is not the cost of buying the aircraft at all. It is the cost of flying and maintaining them across the decades. The sustainment tail dwarfs the purchase. Read a GAO report on a major program and the pattern jumps out. The money to buy the fleet is a mountain. The money to keep it flying for 50 years is a bigger mountain behind it, and that second mountain is the one that pays the contractor quietly for generations after the ribbon is cut. That thing everybody argued about, the sticker price, turns out to be the smaller half of the story. Now sit with what that means for the company on the other side of the deal. Every one of those sustainment dollars, stretching across half a century, is revenue. Predictable, recurring, contractually locked-in revenue, flowing year after year long after the sale is a distant memory. Wall Street loves revenue that looks like this. It is steady. It is defensible. It is hard to disrupt. A company whose income is a stack of 50-year sustainment contracts to a government customer is about as close to a bond as an operating business can get, and investors pay a premium for exactly that kind of certainty. A jet was a one-time payment. Its sustainment is an annuity, and an annuity that runs for 50 years is worth vastly more than any single sale. Why the maker owns the aftermarket. So why can one company capture all of that? Why does the sustainment money flow back to the maker instead of to whoever offers the best price? It is the deepest moat in this entire business. When you buy a modern weapon system, you are usually buying it from a single source, and only that source can support it. A company that designed the jet holds the technical data, the intellectual property, the tooling, the proprietary parts, and the deep knowledge of how the machine actually works. In many cases, no one else is legally or practically permitted to make the spares or perform the deep upgrades. A buyer cannot shop around. It cannot take its business to a cheaper supplier. For the parts and the fixes its multi-billion-dollar fleet depends on, there is exactly one store in the world, and the maker owns it. There is a phrase for this in the trade: being locked to a single source, and defense buyers know the feeling well. Once a fleet is in service, switching makers is close to impossible. You would have to redesign the parts, recreate the tooling, rebuild the knowledge, and requalify everything for safety at a cost so vast that it almost never happens. So the customer stays and pays, and the one store keeps the lights on. Think about the power that gives the seller. A normal company that sells you a product has to win your business again next time, because a competitor could undercut it. A defense prime that sold you a fleet has no such worry for the aftermarket. You are, for the life of that fleet, its captive customer. You will be back again and again for decades because you have no other option, and it can price that support knowing you cannot walk away. There is nothing sinister required for this to work. No bad faith, no scheme. It is the plain structure of the thing. Build something complex enough that only you understand it. Sell it to a customer who will depend on it for half a century, and the aftermarket falls to you by default, not by trickery. The moat is the machine. This is the same shape as the printer sold cheap and the ink sold dear, or the razor and the blades, except the razor costs tens of millions. The blades run for 50 years, and the customer is a government that has bet its national defense on the machine. This is why a contractor can sometimes afford to price the initial sale aggressively, even thinly, to win the program. Winning the program is not really winning a sale. It is winning the aftermarket, the decades of captive sustainment that follow, and that tail is where the durable fortune is made. This is why the fight to be chosen is so brutal, and why so much rides on a single procurement decision. Losing a major program is not losing one order. It is losing 50 years of guaranteed revenue to a rival, and watching them collect the tail you will never touch. The competition is fierce because the prize is not the sale. The prize is the annuity behind it, honestly. Of all the business models in this series, this is one of the most quietly powerful, because the lock-in is not a trick or a temporary edge. It is built into the machine itself, and it lasts as long as the machine flies. The strange incentives now follow the dollar into the contract itself, because how these deals are written shapes everything, and it produces some strange incentives. Many defense contracts, especially for developing something brand new, are not fixed-price deals where the seller must eat any overrun. They are structured on a cost basis, where the government agrees to cover the contractor's costs, plus an agreed profit on top. Cost plus, it is called. Cost plus contracts contain an incentive that would look bizarre in any normal business. If your profit is calculated on top of your costs, then higher costs can mean higher profit. That very thing a normal company fights to reduce its costs is a thing a cost-plus contractor has far less reason to fear, and sometimes a quiet reason to grow. This is one root of the cost overruns that shadow so many big programs. When a program runs over budget and behind schedule, it is often reported as a failure or a scandal, and sometimes it is. But look at the structure, and you see that the incentives were never fully pointed at coming in cheap. A complex, one-of-a-kind system built on a contract that softens the pain of overruns run for a captive customer who is already committed is a recipe for costs that drift upward and for the numbers we all read about with such alarm. A second strange incentive is complexity itself. A simpler machine is cheaper to sustain and easier for others to support. A fantastically complex, proprietary one is expensive to sustain and impossible for anyone but the maker to touch. Its economics quietly reward building something intricate and unique, because intricacy and uniqueness are exactly what lock the customer in for the long, lucrative decades that follow. The costs and the risk. This is a formidable business, but it comes with real risk, and the costs and the risks on the contractor's side are real. Developing a modern weapon system costs a fortune up front, often years of it, spent before a single unit is delivered or a single dollar of sustainment flows. That engineering is bleeding edge and often fails, gets redesigned and fails again. Programs run late. A company carries enormous cost and enormous uncertainty through the long development years, betting that the program will survive to reach the profitable sustainment phase on the far side. That survival is never guaranteed, which is the great risk hanging over the whole model. Defense programs are political creatures. They live and die by budgets, by administrations, by shifting national priorities, by the votes of legislators. A program can be cut, capped, or canceled outright, and when it is, the entire glittering future of sustainment revenue can vanish with it. That annuity you were counting on for 50 years disappears in a single budget decision. A contractor who bet everything on winning a program can watch that program die in committee, taking the aftermarket fortune with it before it ever arrives. So the model is powerful, but the bet is heavy. Huge money and years of risk up front, a political guillotine hanging over the program the entire time, and the reward, the captive decades of sustainment, only arriving for the programs that survive the gauntlet to reach the other side. The military-industrial complex, in one word. To understand how this became the shape of the business, you only need one moment, and one man who saw it coming. In 1961, in his farewell address as he left office, President Dwight Eisenhower, a former general who had commanded armies, warned the nation about something he named for the first time: the military-industrial complex. He described the rise of a vast, permanent arms industry, tightly bound to the government that was its only customer, and he cautioned that its combined influence, economic and political, could grow beyond healthy limits. He was not describing a conspiracy, he was describing exactly the economic structure we have been following. A small number of enormous contractors, selling to a single giant customer on long and lucrative terms, with deep and lasting ties between the buyers and the sellers. Everything since has deepened that shape. Systems grew more complex, the programs grew longer, the sustainment tails grew richer, and the handful of prime contractors, the Lockheed Martins and their peers, grew into some of the most durable businesses on Earth, precisely because their revenue is not one-time sales, but decades of locked-in support to a customer that cannot leave. Eisenhower saw the outline of it in 1961. Dollars have been flowing along exactly those lines ever since. What makes the warning remarkable is who gave it. This was not a critic of the military. This was the general who had led the largest Allied armies of the Second World War, telling the country, on his way out of the White House, to keep a careful eye on the very industry he had depended on. He understood the machine from the inside, and he understood that its economics would pull, always, in one direction, toward more. How the smart contractors play it. So how do the winners in this business actually win? A few disciplines separate the giants from the also-rans. They win the platform to own the aftermarket. Smart primes understand that the sale is a doorway, not a destination, so they fight ferociously to win the program, even on thin initial terms, because winning the platform means owning the sustainment river that follows for 50 years. They protect the moat. They hold their technical data and intellectual property tightly, because the moment a customer or a rival can legally make the spares and perform the upgrades, the captive aftermarket cracks open and the annuity leaks away. Guarding that exclusivity is guarding the whole fortune. Every fight over technical data rights, every clause about who may service the fleet, every battle over whether the customer can open up the parts supply to competition, is really a fight over the annuity. It looks like paperwork. It is worth billions. They diversify across programs. Because any single program can be canceled by a political stroke, the durable giants spread themselves across many programs, many services, many nations, so that no one budget vote can sink them. A broad base of sustainment tails is far safer than a bet on one. The giants you have heard of did not become giants by winning one perfect program. They became giants by holding dozens of programs at once, across aircraft and ships and vehicles and systems, so that the loss of any single one is a wound, not a death. Breadth is the armor that a business this exposed to politics has to wear, and they manage the politics as carefully as the engineering. In a business where the customer is a government, and the fate of every program runs through legislatures and budgets, the relationship, the lobbying, the jobs spread across many districts are not a side activity. They are core to survival, because a program with broad political support is a program that is far harder to cancel. The verdict. So can you make money owning a defense contract? Yes. And the right one can be among the most durable money machines in the entire economy, but only if you understand that the machine you are selling is almost beside the point. Picture the good outcome. You win a major program. You carried the heavy development risk, the years of cost, the engineering that nearly failed more than once, and you came out the other side with a fleet in service and a sustainment contract stretching across the decades. Now, year after year, the parts orders come, the upgrade contracts come, the maintenance revenue comes, all of it flowing to you because you are the only one who can provide it from a customer who cannot leave, backed by budgets that renew with each cycle. You are not selling weapons. You are collecting a toll for half a century on a road the customer can never leave. Now, the bad outcome. You bet everything on a program, poured years and fortunes into development, and then the political winds shifted. That program was capped or cut or killed outright in a budget fight, and the sustainment annuity you were counting on to repay all that risk never arrived. Or the development itself spiraled so far over cost and schedule that the whole program collapsed under its own weight and its own scandal. That same model that mints fortunes from the programs that survive destroys the contractors whose programs die on the way. Same business. What separates a dynasty from a disaster is whether the program you bet on lived long enough to reach the decades of sustainment on the far side. That is the whole game in one sentence. Survive development, survive the budget votes, survive the political weather long enough to reach the sustainment years, and the model rewards you like almost nothing else in business. Fall short of that far shore, and the same model that would have made you a dynasty leaves you with nothing but the bills. Look again at that fighter jet on the news, the one with the enormous price tag that everyone is arguing about. That price, the one that fills the headline, is the part of the story that ends. It is a single payment, made once, and then it is over. A part that does not end is invisible, and it is far larger. It is the 50 years of parts and fixes and upgrades trailing quietly behind that jet, flowing steadily back to the one company allowed to provide them from a customer who committed the moment the deal was signed and cannot uncommit now. The sale made the news. That tale made the fortune. A most powerful thing a defense contractor ever sells is not a weapon. It is the decades of dependence that come welded to it. The long, unbreakable relationship that begins the day the sticker price is paid and does not end until the machine itself is finally retired, by which time the company has usually already sold the nation its replacement and started the whole long, lucrative clock again.